Before we begin this tragic tale, we must talk about the mind that created it. This story comes from Mary Shelley, a young woman who, at just 18 years old, gave the world one of the darkest and most powerful stories ever written. The novel is called Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus, first published in 1818. And despite what many people believe, Frankenstein is not the monster. Frankenstein is the man who created the monster. This story was born in a time when the world was changing. Electricity was being discovered. Science was beginning to challenge religion. Humanity was starting to believe maybe we don't need God anymore. Maybe we can create life ourselves. And that single dangerous idea is the heart of this story. World of Frankenstein. Frankenstein takes place in 19th century Europe, a world of candlelight instead of electricity, horse carriages instead of cars, universities obsessed with forbidden knowledge, and scientists who were starting to play with forces they did not fully understand. It is a world that feels quiet and beautiful on the surface, but underneath it is full of grave robbing, secret experiments, moral fear, and dangerous ambition. This is not a fantasy world of dragons and magic. This is a realistic world where the real monster is not created by spells but by human arrogance. What this story is really about. Most people think Frankenstein is a horror story, but it is actually a story about loneliness, abandonment, responsibility, the consequences of playing God, and what happens when a creator runs away from his own creation. It asks terrifying questions. What if science goes too far? What if we create life but refuse to love it? Who is the real monster? The creation or the creator? And so, this is not a story that begins in a laboratory. This is not a story that begins with lightning. This story begins in the cold, endless, merciless ice of the Arctic, where a ship is trapped, where a man is dying, and where a terrible story is about to be told. Part 1. A man found in the ice. Story does not begin in a laboratory. It begins at the edge of the world. Robert Pelton was a man driven by dreams of glory. He commanded a ship that pushed into the frozen seas of Arctic, chasing discoveries no one else had ever made. His letters to his sister were filled with excitement and confidence. But the world around him was nothing but endless ice and silence. One day, the crew saw something impossible, a giant figure moving across the ice, pulling a sled. Before they could understand what they had seen, they found another man lying on a broken sheet of ice, barely alive. He was weak, starving, and close to death, but his eyes still burned with a strange intensity. His name was Victor Frankenstein. Walton saved him and brought him aboard. As Victor slowly recovered, he began to speak not like a normal man, but like someone haunted by something he could never escape. And so, in the middle of the frozen wasteland, Victor Frankenstein began to tell his story. Part 2: Child who could not accept death. Victor Frankenstein was born into comfort and love in Geneva. His parents were kind and his childhood was peaceful. He grew up alongside Elizabeth, who was gentle and caring, and Henry Clerval, his closest friend. Nothing in his early life suggested that he would one day become the center of a tragedy. But even as a boy, Victor was different. While others were satisfied with simple pleasures, he was consumed by questions about how the world worked. He read ancient books about forgotten scientists and alchemists who believed that the secrets of life could be uncovered. But then his mother died. Her death changed everything for him. For the first time, Victor was forced to face the absolute power of death. He watched life leave the body of someone he loved, and in that moment, something inside him hardened. Death no longer felt natural, it felt like an enemy. From that day on, Victor did not just want to understand life, he wanted to defeat death. University of Ingolstadt. He studied modern science, chemistry, and anatomy. Slowly, an idea began to grow in his mind, an idea that would consume him completely. What if life could be created? What if the human body was only a machine waiting to be repaired? And what if death was not final? He did not share these thoughts with anyone. He kept them locked inside his own head, were darker every day. Part 3: The Road into Obsession. At first, Victor still tried to live like a normal man, but slowly everything else began to fade. His studies were no longer enough. Isolated himself from friends and family, locking himself inside his rooms for months at a time. Days and nights lost their meaning as he surrounded himself with instruments, notes, and materials he did not want anyone else to see. He studied the human body in ways no one should. He visited places where the dead were kept. He looked at things that most people could not even imagine. And all the while, he told himself the same lie. This is for the good of humanity. But deep inside, it was no longer about humanity. It was about proving that he could do what no one else had ever done. Victor Frankenstein was no longer chasing knowledge, he was being consumed by it. Part 4: The Night Life Was Born. On a dark and silent night, Victor finally completed his work. In a quiet room, lit only by a candle, he watched as the impossible happened. Creature's chest began to rise, its eyes opened, and it was finally alive. In that moment, Victor realized his terrible mistake. The thing he had created was not beautiful. It was not divine. It was horrifying. Its skin barely covered the muscles beneath. Its eyes were strange. Its movements were unnatural. Overcome by fear and disgust, Victor ran. The man who had dreamed of creating life could not even look at what he had made, and so he abandoned it. Part 5. A Child in a Cruel World. Creature was born like a child, confused, weak, and alone. He did not know who he was. He did not know what he was. He only knew that the world was cold and that it hurt. Wherever he went, people screamed and ran away. Some attacked him, others chased him off. He did not understand why. Eventually, he found a small place near a cottage where a poor family lived. From hiding, he watched them. Slowly, he began to learn. He learned how they spoke. He learned how they worked. He learned what kindness looked like. He learned to read. He read books and discovered ideas like love, family, and friendship. For the first time, he hoped. When he finally gathered the courage to show himself, they did not see his heart, they only saw his face. They beat him and drove him away. And in that moment, something inside him broke. Part 6. When Pain Becomes Hate. Filled with despair, the creature wandered until he met a small child. At first, he thought the child might not fear him. He was wrong. In anger and desperation, he killed the child, and with that act, he crossed a line he could never return from. Soon after, he found Victor Frankenstein again, and he told him everything. He told about his loneliness, his suffering, his failed hope. I was born good, he said, but misery made me evil. He demanded that Victor create another being like him, a companion, so he would no longer be alone. And Victor agreed. Part 7. The Second Betrayal. Victor began to work again, but fear followed him. What if they created a race of monsters? In the end, he destroyed the second creation before it could live. The creature watched and he promised revenge. Part 8. Everything is taken. One by one, the people Victor loved began to die. His friend and finally Elizabeth on their wedding night. The creature did not feel joy. Revenge did not bring him peace. It only made the emptiness larger. Part 9. The End of the World. Victor chased the creature across the world, across mountains, across frozen seas, until at last he collapsed in the Arctic, where Robert Walton found him. Victor finishes story and then he dies. Part 10. The Last Moment. The creature came to see him one last time. He did not celebrate, he wept because now he was truly alone, and he walked away into the frozen darkness, never to be seen again. So tell me, who was the real monster? The one who looked like one, or the one who created life and abandoned it? Some knowledge comes at too high a price. Some lines should never be crossed, and some creations should never be born. Hope you liked this video. Share among your friends, like, and don't forget to subscribe my YouTube channel, Monsters in Ink, for more legendary stories.